Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to And She Thrived, which is a platform which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women. And we accept submissions of any form, such as the written word and poetry, or even with art. We are very, very fortunate today to have Zeeba join us all the way from Singapore as a guest today, who will be sharing her bezels of wisdom with us. And I would like to welcome you. Assalamu alaikum, Zeeba.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thanks for having me today, Samaya.
How is your Ramadan going?
Good, thank you.
Very good. So I'm just going to start with a bit of introduction. Zeeba is an internationally experienced Ayurvedic clinician, meditation teacher, energy healer, and motivational speaker who uses holistic treatment to restore her patients' mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health, and to prevent disease and disorders. She especially focuses on healing trauma, which often leads to anxiety, depression, feelings of loss, and low self-esteem. She has presented month-long workshops to corporate clients, including some well-known global leaders. She has also led meditation and yoga workshops at schools internationally to incorporate wellness education into their curriculum. She has explored different types of non-religious and religion-based meditations and uses them as part of her treatments. She's also a leading practitioner with Mindvalley Soulvana, a global healing and meditation collective, where her meditations and podcasts have helped many people around the world. In 2020, she was honored by an invitation to be part of a live interactive session hosted by His Holiness the Dalai Lama on the topic of integrated healthcare and compassion. Zeeba was raised mainly in the USA, but comes from a mixed heritage background. Her early career spanned modeling, acting, television, radio, and journalism before she entered academia and became a professor in communications to teach and research religious harmony across various interpersonal, organizational, and intercultural contexts. She believes strongly that it is imperative to meditate, even in the good times, to build a silo of resilience so that when we are faced with challenges, we are not running on empty and are able to weather any storm. Zeeba is trained and certified in the Ayurveda sciences at Union Yoga Ayurveda, affiliated with Atreya, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly, Atreya Ayurvedic Medical College, and the Indian Institute of Patanjali Yoga, associated with Swami, maybe you should say the rest of this, and a registered member of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, USA. So it sounds like you have a wealth of experience when it comes to trauma healing. So we are very blessed and fortunate to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for that intro, Samaya.
So my first question would be, I do know that you are also a divorcee yourself and a mother. And would you say that your own personal divorce has influenced the healing work that you do?
Absolutely, it does play a part. Any trauma that I've experienced in my life, be it trauma with a big T, which are major life changes, a death, for example, incarceration of a parent, major loss of any kind, like a divorce, impacts my work and also allows me to relate more to my clients. So we have the big T traumas that most of us go through in life, and some of us get it early on in childhood, based on the family that we're born into, the culture, the society that we're born into. But then there are also the little T traumas, like the boss at work constantly picking on us, or constantly worrying about if we're going to be able to make rent this month. Those are more of the low-grade, chronic, nagging traumas that we all experience as well, and both affect our physical, mental, and emotional health in different ways. So I do draw upon my past experience. I have since remarried, and so I was divorced many years ago.
Okay.
But of course, you change when you go through any kind of chasm in life, because it's a time to rebuild, reconstruct, and redefine how you want to show up in the world now, while sometimes going through a very harrowing context around you.
Okay. Good. Now, being a person who has been through a divorce herself, as well as dealing with many patients who have undergone trauma, what do you think are the biggest issues that women face post-divorce?
I think there's a lot of fear, and this is in no particular order, but there's a lot of fear around finance in general, whether it's, oh my goodness, am I going to be able to make it on my own? Or how will the assets be split? Is it going to be contentious? There's a lot of worrying around that, whether she asked for the divorce or her partner asked for the divorce. If children are involved, then it takes it to a whole other level. Because there could or could not be a custody battle. It could or could not be hugely traumatizing for the child or children involved. And then I think there's also an aspect of, what will people think? What will people say? How's my family going to take this? How are my parents going to deal with the news? Who can I turn to for support and really and truly confide in? Because it is a roller coaster time of emotion. Especially if we're the ones to ask for the divorce,
right?
Then it's, should I really go ahead and do this? We're initiating, so the power, the locus of control lies with us. And we don't want to be blamed. We don't want to be, in retrospect, I think we want to be very cautious in our decisions, because as women, we're raised to be the people pleasers. We're raised to be the placaters of others. And so for us to be able to say, no, I'm putting myself first, I'm unhappy and I'm no longer condoning X, Y, and Z, and either you work with me or we're going to have to part ways, is a very, very big responsibility to take on, especially when children are involved. And so I think that besides finances, besides custody, there's also this burden, responsibility, and potentially the ensuing shame and guilt that can come with taking that decision.
Okay, so you mentioned things such as finance, children, the perception of other people, cultural limitations, really, because that would be how you are perceived and or feeling guilty. From all of the things that you've mentioned, what would you say would be like the starting point? So post-divorce, right? What should be the thing that one prioritizes with all of the stuff going on, and of course, the tremendous self-esteem issues and, the trauma aspect, and with all the mix, what would you say would be the starting point that one should prioritize?
It would come down to self-care. And within the realm of self-care, I think there are a few things. Number one is compassion for yourself. Most divorces that I know of are not amicable. And so the woman does suffer. There is an element of suffering. You can be suffering on the part of the children. You can feel bad. You can have self-doubt. You can have guilt. You can have shame. You can have people say, I told you you shouldn't have married him. Remember 15 years ago? I told you. Those aunties, those uncles, whomever, relatives, friends are going to come back at times and maybe remind you of that. And that causes its own unique form of suffering. And so I would say that during this time, learn to cultivate compassion for yourself. And compassion is the wish for suffering to end. You can have compassion for yourself. You can have compassion for your children. You can have compassion for your loved ones who are hurt by the decision to divorce. But really cultivate compassion, because it is hard to go through a divorce. And if you're suffering, it's not like you're doing it wrong and you've somehow suffered more than others. It's just that hard. It is a tough experience to go through. So the first thing I think is cultivate compassion and really root for your own suffering to end. And you can do that by meditation. I mean, there are many ways. This is a trauma that you're experiencing. And science has shown that when we touch ourselves physically, when we're triggered, or when we're deeply upset by something, it helps to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which causes us to relax. So you can take your hands and put them over your heart and just close your eyes and do a simple meditation where you repeat to yourself, may my suffering end. May I be in peace. May I see what is spiritually uplifting. May I be at ease. And you can just repeat that until you feel better. Or you can do the Buddhist loving kindness meditation, which says, may I live in safety. May I be happy. May I live with ease. May no one suffer. And so you can do some variation of anything that brings you peace. You know, you can recite your favorite ayat from the Quran Sharif. You can recite your favorite hadith, your favorite poem, the favorite verse from your favorite song, whatever it is that brings you peace. The other thing that you can do, if putting your hands over your heart, you know, further triggers you, you can put one hand on the back of your neck, on your brain stem, and then the other one across your forehead. And for some people, this is super effective because it kind of contains your head, which is where all the ruminating thoughts are anyway. And again, recite something that brings you peace. And the third physical pose that I found to be very effective with my clients is to cross your arms and either put your hands on your biceps or under your armpits. And again, that stimulates deeper breathing, it stimulates the vagus nerve, and it brings you a sense of calm. And all of those are acts of self-care. They're all acts of compassion. You know you're going through a tough time, and you're self-soothing. And sometimes the truth is we don't have someone we can call at 3 in the morning when we're having an anxiety attack. And so learning to cultivate the skill of self-soothing is super important when we're going through any kind of trauma. The other thing I would recommend, Samaya, is learning to be on your own side. You know, when we go through divorce, and starting from that point, you're going to make mistakes. It's a learning experience. You've never gone through this before. And even if you have, it's going to be different based on who you're married to and what the context is. Again, are children involved? Are they not? Do you have a lot of assets? Do you not? You know, are you trying to move to another city, but he's trying to keep you back where you are? There's a lot of that. So every experience is unique, and you get to make mistakes along the way. You will, and that's part of the process. And so if you dispel any preconceived notions that you have to be perfect going through this, then you end up putting a lot of stress on yourself, and that's unnecessary. And that in and of itself creates suffering. But when we accept that making mistakes is part of the process, then when they occur, what we do is we exercise compassion and we feel better.
I think that these are immensely valuable points because speaking from my own perspective, some people like myself, we're so much in the head and we think about things, or even just with praying, it's very silent. But with the kind of meditation that you mentioned, where you're physically using your hands or touching the body or saying something out loud, it's like a physical manifestation. And it's almost like a release rather than just staying in the head, which is very, very powerful. And also, when it comes to self-compassion, we are not people who are taught how to be self-compassionate. We are never taught that. And we always rely on like a parent to say something to make us feel better, or a spouse or a friend. And what if, God forbid, those kind of individuals are absent from your life? And we have to be able to generate the skill of self-compassion, which I only became aware of within the last couple of years. So it's extremely valuable. If you have any other tools of how one can switch to a mentality of being self-compassionate, please do share, because that's a huge one, because that is so closely linked to severe struggles with self-esteem, which I find almost all women undergo during a divorce, even if they are relieved and glad that they made the correct decision in leaving. Whether they were given the divorce or whether they're initiating the divorce, there's still something that it's so utterly traumatic in terms of our self-perception. So if there's anything else you'd like to add with regards to inculcating self-compassion, that would be great. Otherwise, we can move on.
I found that some clients have a really tough time with self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I think of someone you care for deeply. You know, your best friend, someone, a relative you love very, very much, and project your situation onto them. How would you talk to them right now? If they came to you and said, Sumaya, I'm going through this harrowing time. It's so tough. I can't sleep at night. I don't know what to do. I can't eat, or I'm overeating, or I'm eating at odd hours. You know, I'm just absolutely miserable. I'm so scared. I don't know what tomorrow holds. You know, I'm going to have all these major decisions to make, and I just feel so alone right now. You would not turn around and say, oh my word, you are so stupid. I can't believe you messed this up again. We told you not to go ahead. And yet, that same voice we internalize and have a tendency of turning upon ourselves with. And so this is the time to really cultivate the voice of the inner nurturer. The person who says, okay, yes, maybe I was forewarned. And perhaps I should not have married this individual. Suppose that's what you're being fed right now, is the I told you so scenario. Then you can say, you know what? There was a 50-50 chance of us getting a divorce, okay? No one had any premonition of any kind that it was guaranteed to end this way. Okay, so they had a 50-50 chance of being right. They were right. And now I'm here. And from this point, this is what I'm choosing to do. This is what is within my power, and this is how I'm choosing to go forward. That cultivating the voice of the inner nurturer is an example of self-compassion. Instead of allowing the voice of our inner critic to run, to beat ourselves up, to berate us, to chastise us, to criticize us, and ultimately, like you were saying, start planting the seeds of low self-esteem, of guilt, of shame. Now, if we genuinely had a moral fault in the relationship, within the marriage, then yeah, we ought to feel guilt and shame because that's right. And so we ask for forgiveness. We ask for forgiveness from the good Lord. We ask for forgiveness maybe from our partner, you know, whoever we wronged. Or we ask for forgiveness from that person during prayer. We don't actually have to approach that individual and say, you know, I apologize for X and I would like your forgiveness. Sometimes it's safer and more compassionate towards ourselves to not speak to the other individual. Maybe distance is what's required right now, and maybe distance is a form of self-compassion too. So I think the best way to cultivate self-compassion is to really grow the voice of our inner nurturer. And that comes from awareness, to realize when we're beating ourselves up and to learn to quiet the voice of the inner critic. The voice of the inner critic is important because it points out when we've done something wrong or bad. But we need to learn to cut it off because it has a tendency of going on long after it's effective. Mm-hmm. It can say, hey, Zeeba, you messed up, but it doesn't get to go on about it for 3 days. Right? It doesn't get to go on and on about it every hour on the hour and torture me. Mm-hmm. And so that's when the voice of my inner nurturer kicks in. It's okay, you did something wrong, and it's okay. If there are amends that you need to make, if there's action that you need to take to correct the wrong, do it, and then it's done with. You learn you were unskillful. You learn how you would do it again should you be presented with the opportunity in the future. How would you choose differently? And then done. That's all. That is self-compassion.
Right. I was just reading this morning, actually, in this excellent book that's about how one's mental state can, or it does. I mean, science has shown how it has a huge impact in terms of one's healing in general. But they were saying that there are certain people who are prone to pessimism. It's their general disposition. However, optimism can be learned. And it's linked to what you've just said, that when you see yourself in a state of adversity, You have that negative thought, and how you have to physically and consciously put a stop to that thought. Because if you go down that path, then you're going to have a consequence, which is going to affect the way you feel about yourself. You might have catastrophic, thought process after that. It might be self-sabotaging in some way. So they said, even if it means, like, for example, keeping like a rubber band and you have to snap it, or to like smack yourself, or do something that's just going to stop it. And then you can train yourself to change the way that we respond to these things. So that's promising, because then it means that we're not just doomed to a certain state of being, because I know that some of us can be quite fatalistic as well. That's just how I am, or I don't see myself thinking any other way. But these things can be learned, right?
Absolutely. And neuroscience has been showing for the last decade that we can create new neural pathways, and we can choose how we want to be. And all it requires is awareness and repetition. And we can change that predisposition that we have towards this negativity bias. And the negativity bias is actually a good thing. It allowed us to survive as a species when we were constantly scanning for danger. Because if the tiger jumped out at us and we thought, oh, sweet, the tiger's here to play, we wouldn't be here today, right? So instead, if we heard a rustling in the bushes behind us, we thought, oh, maybe it's a tiger, and we ran away. It is that danger mechanism that allowed us to survive. But nowadays, there is no tiger. And when we jump at everything, over time, we end up becoming hyper-vigilant. And it wreaks havoc on our physical body. It drains us mentally. It affects us emotionally. We go into hyperarousal mode and we develop anxiety. Or we just shut down entirely because we become hypoaroused and we become depressed and withdrawn and isolated. And neither, of course, are good for us. So we need to learn to expand our window of tolerance. And any kind of trauma is actually an exercise in that. How can we learn to cope better within the framework of what's happened to us, so that we don't become hyper-aroused and we don't become hypo-aroused? And that's really what we're looking at, is constant resilience, Samaya, every single moment of every single day, to exercise, as we say in psychology, agency, which is the control that we have, the ability to choose. Like if I'm thirsty, I have agency by taking a sip of water. And again, it's those small moments, it's those small decisions that are also acts of self-compassion. I'm suffering, I'm thirsty, so I take a sip of water. And so when we go throughout the day, we feel sad, we feel down, we feel like a failure, which is another common thing that I hear with my female clients. I've let everyone down. But what about you? Have you let you down? Or do you know that you did the best that you could have within that marriage, given the set of circumstances? Right? It's all about resilience and exercising agency. And when we exercise agency, we become, we persevere more, we've got more grit, and we feel more empowered. And that's what we need, because we feel like all of our power has been taken away from us when we get divorced. We're just kind of out there in the open now, and there's no one to support us, protect us, help us to the extent that we want it. And then we feel bad because we don't want to impose on others. So oftentimes we won't ask for help. We won't ask for support because we don't want to turn around and be a burden on others. We say, I'm grown. I should be able to do this by myself. It was my decision to get married. I did it. I was part of the equation because the marriage fell apart. And so this is on me. And instead of turning to others and asking for help or support or resources, we tend to go within ourselves. And that can also be a danger zone. So sometimes, again, an act of self-compassion is asking for help. It's, saying, I need a hug, and crying in the arms of another to release that pent-up energy, to release that fear.
There are two things I wanted to ask you about. The one thing you mentioned was about repetition. So when you say repetition, do you mean in terms of affirmations or in terms of action? That was the one question. And the second question was, when you talk about agency, how would one effect that kind of agency or begin to do so?
So the first question is, you can do it both ways. You can do it through affirmation, and you can also do it through the choices that you make every day. For example, again, catching the voice of your inner critic. That's agency. You have power over that. You have to cultivate awareness, and the moment you realize, I'm beating myself up, you stop. So that's one example of repetition. And then you can do it out loud. You know, it can be done through a physical action, like you talked about snapping the rubber band. It can be done with, you know, all kinds of things. You can use doorways, for example. Every time you walk through a door, you say something kind and loving to yourself. You pause, you take a moment, you take a deep breath. You know, you could put your hand on your heart if you want and say something like, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And then you walk through the door. So you can use little reminders like that, or every time you sit down, you say something loving to yourself.
Or look in the mirror. We are so self-critical when we look into the mirror. Oh my God, in the morning.
Absolutely.
And
full of
would
criticism.
you say that to a friend? Would you say to a friend, oh my gosh, you look awful. You're totally aging.
Absolutely. You know, you're sagging here, you're not firm enough there, you're aging here, you got wrinkles there, you know, you're too small here, you're too big there. I mean, it's nonstop criticism with our self-talk. And again, you know, is this how we would speak to someone we loved? And when we learn to speak to ourselves in a loving way, which is a very alien practice, I think, for many of us, then when it becomes second nature, life becomes so much easier. Because I tell you something, Sumaya, when we love on ourselves, other people want a piece of that action. They want to get in on how we are able to love. And we become irresistibly attractive.
Do you think that's because when you start to love yourself deeply and authentically and genuinely, that it actually increases your vibration? And as you know, we are all beings of energy, and people feel that, or is it more to that? More to it than that?
No, I think it's precisely what you just said. When you are emitting the vibration, the frequency of love, of gratitude, of joy, those are the highest energetic frequencies. How sexy are you? You know, it's not like you're trying to be. You're not dressing a particular way. You're not being trendy. You're not wearing a particular lipstick color. You're not made up. But it's just your essence is that. And people feel it when you walk into the room. You know, they look at you and your aura is just emanating love and joy and gratitude. And they want a piece of what you have, right? So they're going to approach you and they might ask you, you know, what do you do to where you're like this? Or what are you going through? Because I want to be like you. Right? And then you end up attracting opportunities that you never thought you could have. You end up attracting people in your life, you know, professionally, personally, that you hadn't previously because you were showing up differently. So I think there's a lot of what you were saying about how we vibrate, how we show up, the energy that we exude, the aura that we have. You can easily walk into a room, right? And you see a depressed person. They don't say a word, but you know that they're down. Because there's a certain energy that we sense from them. And the opposite is also true. When someone's very high energetically, we also sense that. We're naturally drawn to it and attracted to it because we also want to raise our own vibration.
Mm-hmm. I think that everything you're saying is, I know it's 100% spot on. What I can hear in the background are the voices of all of those women who are saying, okay, well, that sounds great, but how can I even begin to embark upon a journey of self-healing when I'm dealing with financial issues and I've got like an ex who is just giving me custody issues and et cetera, et cetera. Or, do you know what I mean? And they feel like they're so swamped and drowning with the logistical issues of life that they are just unable to help themselves in any way. What would you say would be, or they do not have the money, for example, to see like an energy healer or a practitioner of some sort, or, you know, do you have any advice or suggestions for somebody in that boat?
Absolutely. I would say, you know, the point that you raised is super, super valid. Super valid. And I think whether we have money or not, we go through it. You know, there's a lot of fear because of the uncertainty of how things are going to play out. Sometimes we're promised things before divorce, and then during the divorce proceedings, they're taken away from us. You know, and our former partner doesn't want to give us that anymore or do that anymore. So there's a lot of uncertainty until it's like written down in black and white and it's absolutely done. We feel like we can't fully exhale. You know, and once we do, then it's like, now what? Now what do I do? Because you're starting all over again. It's a new system that's in place. You know, children involved, now you got custody and weekends, visitations. It's a whole new lifestyle that you're entering. And if you don't, then it's also a whole new lifestyle that you're entering. So whatever the circumstances, it's newness, and that brings anxiety for many people. If someone doesn't have the money and someone can't really see past tomorrow, which I know many women can't, the first thing I would say is exercise agency and do all that you can that's within your control. You know, if you need to see a lawyer, do it. The first thing that you need to do is acquire knowledge. You have to know what your rights are. Once you know what your rights are, then you can figure out what you want and what you don't want, what you're willing to accept and what's a deal breaker. And then you take it from there, because those will be your guiding principles throughout the process. And then secondarily, you know, that's what we can do in the material world, is exercise agency. Internally, we exercise self-compassion and self-love through acts of self-forgiveness, through acts of self-kindness, and through practices of prayer and meditation. Because externally in the material world, we do all that we can, right? Internally, we've got to surrender. Because we've done everything we can do out there, but we can't guarantee that things are going to turn out the way we want them to. And so we have to relent control to a higher power. And when we're able to surrender through prayer, through meditation, through both, ideally, it brings us a sense of peace, of calm, that an entity, a higher power, has our back, that in spite of what we're going through right now, that might seem really awful, that the universe is a benevolent place. And while this might be bad, the whole universe is not bad. There were good things that happened to us before this trying time, and there will be good things that happen to us after. You know, this is a few pages in a big book.
It is such a key point, is that it's not going to be forever, no matter how much of despair or trauma you're in. It's not forever.
Yeah. And that is so important. It is so important, you know. Everyone, so all the ancient cultures have this saying, this too shall pass. And I know that during my most harrowing times, that was my personal mantra. This too shall pass. Nothing stays forever. But when we're going through really bad times, we feel like, good God Almighty, this is the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Right? But when we stop and remember, really and truly, when we pause and say, in the past, was there ever a bad experience that stayed forever? No. And likewise, was there a good experience that stayed forever? No. No matter how tightly we attempt to hold on to any experience, good or bad, it will not stay. And if you feel really strong, or you feel bold one day, you can challenge yourself when you're having a negative thought or you're scared about something. Try to hold on to that scary thought forever. Try to hold on to it for 1 hour. Try to hold on to it for 5 minutes. And you'll see that you can't, because our mind wanders. So we can't stay in that constant state of fear forever, or doubt or anxiety. It comes and it goes like waves. And the name of the game is to reduce the frequency at which those waves come. And through love and self-compassion, through self-love and self-compassion, to make sure that those waves aren't so high when they do come. So that, we don't want a constant tsunami, right? But, with low tide, we can cope, and that's what we want. Because life is ultimately, Samaya, about challenges, vulnerabilities, and resources. And there will always be challenges in life that we don't have any control over. But how vulnerable we make ourselves, that we have agency over, that we have control over. And acquiring and cultivating the resources externally as well as internally, that we have control over. So in order to deal with all of our trauma, be it divorce or otherwise, it's really about figuring out how vulnerable we want to be, about what, to whom, and when, and cultivating the resources, learning to self-soothe, self-love, be self-sufficient, as well as accepting that asking for help, being vulnerable like that, is also a resource. It is strength. It is courage to ask for help. I know we're bred to be the helpers. And so sometimes we have problems as women asking for help. But in truth, when we ask for help, that's a resource. And it's an act of self-love when we need it and we ask for it.
That's great. On your website, I saw you had the 4 quadrants of healing. Do you think it would be beneficial to our audience for you to mention a bit about that?
Yeah, so in Ayurveda, we look at the 4 bodies, the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual, and the interplay of all of those bodies. And in order to acquire optimal health, all 4 bodies have to be in balance. And there's an interconnection, as Western science is now starting to acknowledge. So when we have emotional turmoil, which is what a divorce starts out as, then it can segue into a mental imbalance, right? So the emotion is anxiety, fear, and then that becomes mental, which can appear in the form of ruminating thoughts. And that can then lead to a physical problem like overeating, undereating,
Pain,
insomnia, fibromyalgia, mysterious pain, or just pain in general, constant tension in the neck and back. And so very often people come to me because of physical pain. But the physical pain is caused by something else. I will, of course, treat the physical pain ASAP. That's what I'll go after. But the physical pain is not, treating the physical pain is not the answer. It's the underlying root cause, which very, very often is emotional. And then there also has to be the spiritual component, like we talked about, the spiritual body, where you have to feel that you have a life purpose, which sometimes if one has been married for a long time and they leave the marriage, they feel like they've been robbed of that purpose. Or, if they were a homemaker and they were, a super supportive entity in the lives of their husband, and now they're no longer in that role, they feel like they have no purpose, they feel worthless. And there is this element of going through grief, because divorce is a loss. It's a loss of, ultimately, what you thought you were going to have. That's what the loss is in divorce.
it's like a funeral, because I read in a book somewhere that it's the death of a dream. It's the dream of the family, and it's the loss of that.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a death of a dream, because the key is you still get to have that dream. It's still your dream. Your dream didn't die because of him. The manifestation of your dream with him is no longer a possibility. But you could still walk away and have that dream and still pursue the manifestation of that dream with another partner.
Absolutely. But at the time, we can't look ahead. It just feels like someone's just died, right?
Yeah, it's very, very painful.
But the doors are not closed. There are opportunities will, inshallah, there'll be as you say, there is the possibility of more joy, more beauty, more, we're able to receive gifts again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, then there is that challenge of opening ourselves up and making ourselves vulnerable to another man. And that comes with practice, it comes with time, it comes with making mistakes, again, which are part of the journey. Falling into the ditches is part of the journey. The key is getting back up every time you fall. Not, oh, I mustn't ever fall into the ditches. No, there's no need for perfection. You get to fall.
This is actually linked to
The
my
key
next
is get up.
question. This is linked to my next question, which is that how does one know that she's healed? Because sometimes a woman might think, oh yes, I'm healed, only to be triggered again. And then they feel, oh my gosh, I'm back to square one. I was totally triggered there. So how do you know when, yes, I am now finally healed?
Sweetie, I'm not sure we're ever totally healed. I think it's more being able to look back at the reverse gap. We're always forward thinking, right? Oh, I have this far to go. I have to reach this goal over here. And so rarely do we pause and look at how far we've come, right? Pause and look at how much you've grown. Where were you a year ago, 6 months ago, 5 years ago? Look at how different you are now, and look at how much you've grown. And like that, going forward, I think it's all about growth. And we'll continue to get triggered. I think it's just how we deal with our triggers. I think it's, again, cultivating that awareness to know that, okay, I'm really triggered right now. And because I'm triggered, I'm not going to react, right? Preconditioning is all about, we have a particular stimulus, and that causes an immediate reaction. And when we cultivate the space of awareness between the stimulus and how we want to show up, then we're no longer reacting, now we're responding. We're an active participant. We're not being controlled by our history. We're not a slave to our history. Now we're becoming a pioneer of our future. We're choosing how we want to be in spite of being triggered. So I don't think healing is necessarily 100% dispelling of all of our triggers, but how do we cope with it differently now that we didn't 10 years ago, right? And those choices, Sumaya, in the present moment, they add up and they make us more peaceful. They make us happier with ourselves. We feel better about ourselves as individuals, as women. And again, it's that energy. People can see, wow, she was really angry, but she didn't blow her fuse. And again, that makes you attractive.
Great. Before we close up, I wanted to ask you if you have any other points just in general advice for divorced women. And then if you have some time, how would you feel about doing, for example, like a 2-minute self-love meditation together? You could do that if you like.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, we have to accept that trauma is a part of life. We're all traumatized. You're no different than anyone else. We all have it. Whether it happened in childhood or adulthood, we can't go through life without being traumatized. Whether it's a big T trauma, like I said at the beginning of our discussion today, or little T trauma. And it's all about, ultimately, about resilience. How do we bounce back from this? Because we are going forward. This won't last forever, and this isn't the end of our life, although it feels like it. We will continue to have more days. And how do we want to show up in those days? And a large element of that is respecting that we need space and time to grieve the loss. I'm not saying, get divorced today and be completely loving and filled with gratitude and joy and show up tomorrow and you're going to get a new partner. No. Be true to yourself and grieve the loss of what you had wished and hoped that you would have with this guy, with this partner. Grieve that loss. And once you feel firm, standing on your own 2 feet, then really commit to being a woman who loves herself, who is on her own side in life, right? Be your own number one fan. Be your biggest cheerleader. And I'm not saying come from a place of ego and boast about yourself. I'm saying internally. When you make a mistake, you don't have to shame yourself. Be loyal to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And be forgiving to yourself.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Zeeba. I really appreciate your time. So grateful. Are you ready to begin with the meditation?
Absolutely. So wherever you are, find a comfortable position. Obviously, if you're listening to this while driving, do not close your eyes. But just get real comfortable wherever you are. You can stand, you can sit, you can lie down. And gently allow your eyelids to float closed. And together, let's take a long, slow, deep breath in. And gently let that go. And again, long, slow, deep breath in, allowing your shoulders to relax, your shoulder blades to slide down your back. And release. One more time, long, slow, deep breath in, feeling your belly expand, your rib cage expand, your collarbones expand, and let that go. Now gently bring your attention to your heart, to the space around your physical heart, to your heart chakra, the energy of love that surrounds your heart. If you'd like, you can place your left hand over your heart and place your right hand on top of your left. With each inhale, feel your chest pressing into your hands. With each exhale, feel your hands pressing against your chest. Now I want you to imagine an emerald green light emanating from your heart space, radiating outward. In Ayurveda, green is the color of love. And like our breath, love has two parts, giving and receiving. With each inhale and each exhale, see that emerald green light pulsating, growing stronger, surrounding your physical body and emanating outward in all directions, to your front, to your back. Green light emanating from the crown of your head and traveling upward. Green light coming out of the soles of your feet into the ground. Green light to your left and to your right. Feel the warmth of this emerald green light surrounding you with the love of God. Accept His love. Allow it to penetrate your heart. Allow it to land within your heart. Really absorb His love. I'll be quiet for a few moments now as you feel the love of God growing within your heart. You are an emissary of light and love. Carry this love with you wherever you go and to whomever you meet. Keeping your eyes closed, when you're ready, you can briskly rub your palms together to generate warmth. And when your palms are warm, keeping your eyes closed, gently cup your eye sockets without touching your eyes, allowing the heat to transfer from your palms to your eyes. When you're ready, keeping your hands where they are, gently open your eyes and blink a few times to allow your eyes to adjust to the light. And gently drop your hands.
Thank you so much, Zeeba. So appreciative of your time. Would you like to tell our viewers what your website address is if they would like to check out more of your resources?
It's zeebahealing.com, and I have a lot of free resources there. And people are welcome to reach out to me for a free consultation if they think that I can be of service to them during their time of need.
Thank you so much. I wish you very well over the last few days of Ramadan and a beautiful and blessed Eid.
Likewise, same to you, my dear. Thank you for having me.
Take care, Zeeba. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.